Welcome to the new episode of Be Remote podcast by CrewScale. And today we are having our guest, Jonathan. Jonathan is CTO of co-founder and CTO of DataStax, which is a company based out of US. It's a decade-old company, and this is doing really, really well. And I'm Subhanshu, your host, CTO of CrewScale.com. So we'll start the conversation. Welcome to the podcast, Jonathan. Thanks a lot for taking a time out and speaking to us.
Delighted to join you.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm delighted to join you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot. Thank you for this. Before we start, I just wanted to know more about you. I mean, apart from work, what are the hobbies? What are the different things that you do on a personal note to keep you unwinded and keep you out of stress? What exactly is as a person, right? So just wanted to a bit curious about this piece.
Yeah, with the pandemic, a lot of the things that I was doing were not available anymore. So I had to pick up some new hobbies. So I started working on generative art. So art, which is art that's created with code, but with a randomness component, so that no two pieces generated by the same algorithm are the same. So I've been a fan of generative art for a while, especially the work of an artist named Tyler Hobbs. And so I decided to, start making art myself, and it's going pretty well. And then on the more physical side, I actually started skateboarding in my 40s last year. So I actually do have one accident story there, which is that I landed on my wrist and it was a pretty hard fall, and I thought it might be broken. So I went to see the doctor, and there were two x-ray technicians. There was a man and a woman, and the woman said, what happened to your wrist? And I said, I fell on it skateboarding. And she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. And the man says, wow, cool. So, just a little bit of a different reaction there.
Absolutely. This is very interesting. Absolutely. So, as we spoke last time, Jonathan, you have five kids at home, and looking at the work from home scenarios, just wanted to know your views about it. I mean, how you're managing your work, and that can be a good
Mm-hmm.
inspiration for a lot of people working from home, having stress about their kids, and so wanted to understand from you how you are managing this work from home with the five kids at home.
Yeah, so I started working from home full time when I started DataStax, 11 years ago. And at the time, I only had three kids. So I've added two more since then. But it is important to, as much as possible, if you can carve out a space in your home that's your workspace. And so for me, that for the first couple years, I was literally working from inside my closet. So I didn't have any other space in the house that I could separate myself from the kids. And so it is to the degree possible, and I know it's not always possible, but I feel a lot more productive when I'm able to have that separate space. And especially if you can have a door that closes, that door kind of symbolizes the difference between, okay, I'm working versus I'm in dad mode and husband mode and so forth. So the second answer I would give to that question is, especially during the pandemic, last 18 months. So I had kids at home when they ordinarily would have been at school. They're a little older now. My youngest is 7, so he's going to school too. But having the kids at home all the time, it was difficult for my wife. It was difficult for me, but one of the things that I do like about working from home is that I don't need to be super rigid about my working hours. So rather than saying I'm working from 9 to 6 or whatever, and trying to be completely focused on work during that time, I think one of the advantages of working from home is that, I can, help get the kids ready for school in the morning, then work for a while, then, have lunch with my 18-year-old, and then, go back to work, and then pick up the younger kids from school, and then work some more. So having that flexibility to say, you know what, it's okay to step away from work and, interact with my kids again, especially when they were at home all day. I think that was a big advantage to, working from home and being used to working from home, and not just like, trying to figure it out as an emergency situation that we're not used to.
Awesome, awesome. I think that's very enlightening. I want to speak a bit, and this is my favorite portion. So I want to understand from you about your Cassandra journey, right? Open source journey. Uh, Typically open source is anti-capitalism, right? So you are not earning anything out of it, right? At the same time, you feel really, really awesome to contribute, right? So what is your motivation level? And you stayed as a chairman of that Apache Cassandra committee for a very long time. So what's your motivation for a lot of people? That will be really helpful for a lot of people to understand how they can be more contributing towards the open source. So from your side, what's your view for that? What is your motivation?
So I've been exposed to open source as as a kind of a hobbyist, as someone who's contributing, on a spare time basis. So before, working on Cassandra, before starting DataStax, I was a big fan of the Python programming language. Cassandra, of course, is in Java, much higher performance than Python. But Python has an elegance to it that I really appreciated. And so I spent some time 15 or so years ago contributing to a Python project called SQL Alchemy, for instance. And so that was something that I was using at work, and it was useful to me, but also I enjoyed the challenge of contributing to this project that was useful to lots, to millions of people. But I think so there's the world of people contributing part-time like that, where it's just like kind of partly motivated by improving the software, but also partly motivated by the spirit of community and giving back. And then there's the other world, which is the more corporate open source, and Cassandra falls into this category. The Linux kernel falls into this category, where most of the contributors are paid by a company to work on that open source project. And so it's not traditional capitalism, but I think it is still a form of capitalism, because DataStax is paying a team of people to work on Cassandra, because Cassandra helps us get customers both for our enterprise distribution of Cassandra, and also our streaming our cloud service for Cassandra. So and we're doing the same thing in the streaming space with Apache Pulsar. So I'm going to back up just a little bit in time. The way that I started contributing to Cassandra, I wasn't one of the original authors. Cassandra was created by a handful of engineers at Facebook, and they open sourced it in the summer of 2008. And I had been hired by a American hosting company called Rackspace, and they said, we need you to build us a scalable database. And so I looked at the NoSQL databases that were super, super young at the time. So there was MongoDB, there was HBase, companies that aren't around anymore. Basho had Riak. And I really liked Cassandra's foundational technology. And I knew that to build a scalable database for Rackspace, when it's effectively just me working on it at first, I would need to build on open source rather than trying to start from something completely new. And so that's what I started doing. I started contributing to Cassandra. I became the first committer outside of Facebook, and later on I became the project chair. So that's an example of where Rackspace was motivated to pay me to work on Cassandra full time to solve their problems, and other companies were doing that as well. So Netflix was an early Cassandra adopter, Apple was an early Cassandra adopter, and so in a similar way, those companies are funding people to work on Cassandra as well. So that's a long answer to your question, but I do think that the larger the open source project is, the more likely it is to be funded in that kind of corporate contributor model.
Absolutely. So thanks a lot for providing this kind of an insight in open source. Any any story or anything would you like to share about your open source experience, which was something which was very unique, or something which you faced, or let's say you tried to develop as a module? So you have any instance of that sort?
Well, so as I mentioned, I started working on Cassandra. I was in Texas. Facebook is in California, so I wasn't near the Facebook Cassandra engineers. And the other people that started working on early Cassandra, I'm thinking way back. One of the engineers was in London, another was in the East Coast of the United States. So we were, very remote from each other. And as I, started working on that, and I started DataStax. I started trying to hire people to come work on Cassandra with me. I wanted to keep that open source model of I will hire smart people anywhere in the world, and I don't want that to be an obstacle to being able to work with them. So the classic, so we did move our corporate headquarters to California, which was something that our investors advised us to do. And from a sales standpoint, they were right. It was good to have the headquarters there, but we've been very clear for the entire history of the company that engineering could be distributed and engineers could work from anywhere. And I think the kind of the rest of the industry is kind of catching up to understanding that thanks to COVID-19, they were forced to figure out how to make that work, and now they're realizing, oh, like that can be a good way to build teams even when there's not a pandemic. And so yeah, I really like the whole management philosophy behind distributed teams. And what I mean by that is, if I'm leading a team in an office, the human mind is biased, and it will think like, oh, Pushpak is, he's a funny guy when we sit next to each other at lunch, and I really like the jokes that he tells. Or Jonathan comes in early and stays late, and I really like seeing him in the office. And when you're distributed, you don't have any of that. All you have is Pushpak is writing great code and solving problems and creating value for our customers. And it's almost like it's as close to a purely fair system as I think we can get. So I really like that part of it. And I also we've talked about a little bit about the work-life flexibility. So between those two, I think it's the right way to build teams and companies.
Absolutely. I think a very important thing is that you are able to vision this whole thing when you started DataStax, right? So you're able to visualize that remote and distributed team is something which can be very productive, right? So at that point of time when work from home was not a compulsion, right? So that is something that I would like to understand what was the main convincing factor, because this is something which you are going out of the way and creating something, some different philosophy for your own, right?
Yeah.
You don't have any kind of a helping material how to be more productive, or you cannot learn from people, right? So but still you took a call to go for a completely distributed team, right? So wanted to understand what motivated you, or not exactly motivation, but what was the factors which actually was very prevalent in your mind, saying that okay, if I do this, this is a clear cut winner for me. As a distributed team is a clear cut winner.
Yeah.
So what was those points?
I mean, so it's kind of like the open source philosophy of scratching your own itch. Like
Mhm.
you work on open source to solve a problem that you're experiencing. And distributed teams were kind of like that for me. I did not want to move to California. So I needed to have a way to run engineering teams that could let me stay in Texas.
Okay.
I think that one of the things we found is that the mix of having that work life flexibility and that egalitarian management model is particularly attractive to more senior engineers who are hitting the time of life where they're in relationships and they're starting families and so forth.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
basically, I was solving a problem that I wanted to solve for my own family situation.
Okay. That's a very good analogy that I mean, very good example that you told about open source philosophy. So what do you think? I mean, the offices are dead, or is it going to be hybrid, or is it going to be completely remote? What's the future you see? What's your view on that?
I think that the trend right now is towards hybrid. And what if you're thinking about doing hybrid, what you need to be very careful of is falling into the trap of treating the remote employees as second class somehow. And a simple example is if I hold a meeting in an office building and I have 3 people on my team in the meeting room with me, and I have 4 people on my team on a screen on the wall joining remotely, it's very, very difficult for those 4 people in the room, to give equal weight to the people that are remote. And so the way you solve that problem is you say, if you're serious about doing hybrid, you need to say, even if you're in the office together, if you are doing a meeting where people are remote, everyone needs to be on a laptop on their own and not in the room together, so that everyone is on an equal
Yeah.
uh, field. Yes.
So, taking a hint from the example that you gave, that's again a thought that I had personally in my mind. So, either you can actually have a completely in office kind of a setup, or you can go for a remote kind of a setup. I think hybrid is something that might face challenges, as you mentioned. And let's say, even if you talk about scenarios where you have a personal life, you have families, right? So even if you have a hybrid model, you have to relocate anyways, right? So the problem is not solved, right? So either this way or
Right.
that way. So let's see how the things will evolve in future, but it will be an interesting thing to watch. Yeah.
Yeah, I think people are looking at it and saying, I can have the best of both worlds, but it's really easy to get the worst of both worlds instead. Um, so that said, DataStax is trying to make hybrid work now, uh, or we will in the very near future, because we do have that headquarters in California. We're going to be opening that back up. We're going to be getting the members of accounting, the members of HR that are used to working in that office together. We're going to start bringing them back in, and so yeah, we will in fact see how it goes.
Absolutely. So, any major challenge that you face while being a complete remote? As you mentioned, like a very good example that being involved in a meeting is something which is a challenging part. So, apart from that, if you face any major challenges, which I mean, something which was not there in office kind of a setup, but at the moment we are at work from home, and this is a very big issue. So,
Yeah.
do you feel any challenge in that? Any scenario or any challenge in that?
So there's two challenges that I think in particular that I don't have great solutions for, and I think that we collectively as an industry need to figure out better answers for. So one of them is completely new graduates. Like if I'm hiring someone with no previous work experience and saying, okay, now here's your laptop and you're going to be on Zoom calls with your team. That's super difficult for them because there's a barrier to collaboration in that environment where if I have a problem and I need to reach out to a senior engineer to help me solve it, it just feels more intimidating if I have to do that over email or over Slack or over Zoom versus if my coworker is in the cubicle right next to me and I can just say, hey, do you have a minute to look at this? And so, when after you have a few years of experience working, then you kind of understand intuitively where that line is of when to kind of escalate those problems and loop in other members of your team or your team lead. But as a brand new to the workforce, that's something that just about everyone struggles with. So that would be the first one. And then the second one is kind of what we've experienced over the last year, where not only are we distributed, but we're distributed 100% of the time. And I think the best option is to be distributed 99% of the time. In other words, it's very helpful to have a team meeting in person, every 6 months or every 12 months, but you need to get that time face to face where you can share drinks, where you can share food and interact with each other, not just on a purely transactional working basis. And so, during COVID-19, we've hired a bunch of new employees that nobody has ever met. And so you don't have that same kind of social capital as you do with people that you've met in person in more social environments. So hopefully, with vaccination going up, we'll be able to start doing that again soon. But if we were to, I don't know how or if it's a good idea to try to be 100% remote 100% of the time.
A scenario I would like to present in front of you. So another angle on, let's say, being completely remote. So you might be a cross cultural team as well. So for example, you might be having few Indian guys, few Chinese guys, few Eastern European people, right? Or maybe from Europe or South America, right? So that actually have a lot of cultural barriers. So for example, if Indians are cracking a joke, which might be a very good local slang, but not be understood by other set of people. So that I think is a major cultural gap that has to be built in a completely distributed team as well. Looks like, but as you said, yeah, it's a very interesting problem to solve. Let's see. There's no clear-cut answer to that as such.
Yeah, I think, yeah. So like my inner, so I have a lot of Scandinavian ancestors. So my grandparents were, Olsons and Johnsons and, Ericssons and so forth. So I kind of have, I definitely have an empathy or an attraction to kind of that Nordic bluntness that you often get. And it does throw off some Americans, I think, but I like that that kind of thing. So I think the answer is just primary. Well, so there's three answers. First answer is there is a common ground. Like we have the common language of business. We do business in English, and so we've got a couple Italian engineers on the team. And when they're discussing technical problems, they discuss them, in English for the benefit of, everyone else. So that's kind of obvious. But then the second one that's a little squishier around the kind of cultural thing you're referring to, I think it just comes down to, be understanding and, assume good intent, rather than trying to think of like, did he mean to be offensive? It's just like, oh no, he probably meant this, innocuous thing, and just assuming that people mean well and that you're on the same team and striving for the same goals. The third thing is that, and this is another thing where I guess I'm not 100% remote 100% of the time again, which is that it does help if you have some overlap in the time zones. And so DataStax hires primarily in American time zones and European time zones, because when you get to Asian time zones, it's just it's very difficult to get synchronous face-to-face communication times. So very early on at DataStax, we had an engineer that we wanted to hire in Japan. And so he was super independent, and he had already started writing patches for Cassandra and giving presentations on Cassandra in Japan without any training from us. And so I said, of course we want to hire you. Like, you're obviously very, very good. And so we hired him, and I knew that it was going to be hard working with him across 13 hours or so of time difference, but it was even harder than I thought it would be. And even as independent as he was, it was hard for both of us. It was hard for him because there was literally nobody else within 8 or so hours, and like the closest people were in Europe. And it was hard for me as well, trying to manage him at that distance, and helping. Again, you're always going to come up against a part of the code that somebody else wrote, and you want to ask him, what were you thinking when you wrote this? And that engineer's asleep for the next 4 hours. Like, it's just harder. Fortunately, there's actually a happy ending to that story, which is that he already said that he wanted to move to the United States, and so we got him a visa in Texas, actually, for 5 years. And he's still with the company. He moved back to Japan. He's raising his kids in Japan. But now, having had that experience of being closer for 5 years, he can be independent now, even from Japan. So again, like, having that synchronous or that closeness, you can kind of build that up in like a bank account, and then you can spend it later, but you need to have it in the account first.
Completely understand, completely fine. So I think on the personal notes, are you I mean, do you favor reading books? And how I mean, are you?
So I've been mostly reading nonfiction lately, but I'll give you one recommendation for fiction that is probably not something you hear a lot, and that is a series of graphic novels called Planetary.
Okay. Planetary. Okay.
And that's by a writer named, I want to say it's Warren Ellis, who's not a relation. Yeah, it's written by Warren Ellis, who's kind of famous in the comics industry, and it's just very, very plot driven, even though it's about superheroes. But the writing is great, the art is great. So I guess if I were going to say, if you haven't read graphic novels before, that's probably not the one to start with. Maybe the one to start with is Batman Year One, because everybody knows who Batman is. You kind of think you know the character, but and I think it was Frank Miller who wrote this one. He takes it in a more mature direction, not in the sense of mature means it's super violent, but in the sense that mature means there's more character development and so forth. So that would be my recommendation to start with, Batman Year One. If you're already into graphic novels and you think you might want to try something a little different, then look up Planetary.
Awesome. And any recommendation in non-fictional books that you're reading lately?
In nonfiction, let me look around my office and see what I've got. So the one that I'm reading right now is called The Constitution of Knowledge, A Defense of Truth by Jonathan Rauch, which is basically about how our society has gotten increasingly polarized, and this is from an American standpoint, in large part because people can't agree on a source of truth. And so you have, right-wing Americans listening to different media and reading different media than left-wing Americans. And so Jonathan Rauch is saying, how do we, what are the principles upon which to rebuild a shared agreement on, this is truth, and we can start to create a mutual understanding from that.
And since DataStax is remote for a very long time, what are your favorite tools that you really like using? Any three? Can you name any three? The favorite remote tools?
Yeah. So this one I think is a little bit, it's obvious, but at the same time, I don't know very many people who are using it. And that is using an iPad with the Apple Pencil. And so 3 or 4 years ago, you had to buy an iPad Pro to use the iPad Pencil. And so it was, that was much more expensive. But today, the entry-level iPad supports Apple Pencil. And what that means is, what I'll do is I'll get on a Zoom call like we're on now, but I'll join from my laptop and I'll also join from my iPad. And if we need to collaborate on diagrams or even take notes collaboratively, I'll use the iPad as the whiteboard. And so I'll still have the camera on me from my laptop, but I'll be able to use, do handwriting and, drawing diagrams with the Apple Pencil. And so that resolves one of the big reasons why, people tell me, hey, we can't be remote. We need to be in an office so we can whiteboard things together. Well, okay, technology solved that problem now. And it costs, I think, is it $300 for an iPad and $100 for the Apple Pencil? So if you're paying an engineer, thousands of dollars a year, you can afford an investment of $400 to make him or her, more productive in that environment. So that would be the big one. And then the other two that I would call out are not specific pieces of technology, but more principles. So the first one is that when you're doing video conferencing, you need good you need good video and you need good audio. And the way you can get good video by buying expensive camera hardware, but generally that's not necessary. What is necessary is good lighting. And you can get a lighting setup for video conferencing for $50. So it's very inexpensive in terms of the capital required. It'll take a little bit of time to set up the lighting tools, but it's a good investment. And even a cheap laptop camera will deliver good results when there's good lighting in the room. And then the other one that I think is maybe a little underappreciated is the importance of good audio as well. And here, what comes with the laptop is not adequate. And so, even an expensive laptop, like, an Apple laptop or whatever, like one of the places they save money and save space is on the microphone and speakers. And so you can get a Bluetooth, desktop microphone that can work with both your phone and your laptop for $70 or so, significantly higher audio quality, both from the speaker and from the microphone. And the microphone is really the important part for the benefit of the people that you're communicating with.
Absolutely, completely. This is really I think that especially that collaborative tool, using iPad as a collaborative tool, is something that can be a really good understanding for a lot of folks. That's absolutely fine. I think that's it from my side, Jonathan. I really appreciate for your time and the way you answered the question. It's really providing a lot of insight on open source, a lot of insight on remote community, and a lot of insight upon how a tech-oriented remote ecosystem will work. Thank you for your time. You want to say something?
Just thanks for having me on the show. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for your time, Jonathan, and we'll share the link and all with you, and really appreciate that.
All right.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.